I'm getting it.
Good. And it looks like the kids will be starting pretty soon. One's from 5 to 11. I'm thinking about a week or so. I'm sorry?
Do they need 2 shots?
I don't know for sure, but I would assume so if they get the Pfizer or well, only the Pfizer is going to be released at this time, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a 2-shot series. It's going to be a smaller dose based on the fact they are children. Okay, I'll open up some prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this time that we can come to study your word. Lord, open our minds, open our hearts, open our ears to your word. Help us understand Paul's concern with the Corinthians and how this might impact and be useful for us even almost 2,000 years later. All these issues are very human, and we are still very human. In your Son's name I pray, amen. Okay, Larry, we're going to be on 4:6 to 4:13, which is the application of God's servants as paradigms of the cross. This is his applications series as he wraps up what he's been talking about in the first few chapters. He wants the Corinthians to stop exaggerating the importance of the human leaders. He wants them to reject tendency to become inflated with pride in their human leaders, and the arrogance that they have must cease. He's going to have a stiff rebuke of their situation. And he wants a life to be measured in accordance to the cross. So Larry, can you read 4:6, please?
Now, brothers, I have applied these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, so that you may learn from us the meaning of the saying, do not go beyond what is written. Then you will not take pride in one man over against another.
Okay, so what is he trying to say here? What is he concerned about?
A man makes their own rules to make it fit their lives.
Yeah.
Like whatever's written, say in the Bible, but they go beyond that.
And so what is the main issue that he's concerned about? It's in the second sentence. What is the main issue that he has concern with the Corinthians?
They're going to make their own interpretation of the rules or making new rules.
So if you are doing that, what does that say about you? What does it say that you have?
Pride.
Pride. And so you have pride and he's telling them that you have too much pride. You have pride in your human leaders, along with what you're saying, then you can make your own interpretation. And so should we have pride in our salvation? Should we have pride in our human leaders? Morning? Afternoon, sorry. So should we? 4:6.
Yeah.
So should we have pride in those things?
Yes?
Well, he's saying no.
No, I mean, not pride to the point of arrogance.
Right.
But, proud of the leadership that's done, proud of our accomplishments, but remember that all of that came through God.
Okay, I will think that is correct. And what he's saying is that we should not have pride in ourselves. We should not have pride in our human leaders, but we should be proud. I can agree with that, in our salvation. But did we earn our salvation? No. And so it's not something we should be prideful about that we actually did something to get it. And so we should not be boasting about that. We should be celebrating that we got our salvation. We should be celebrating about our status, our standing with the Lord, but we didn't deserve it, so we should not be prideful about it in that sense. We should be prideful, as Larry is saying, we're 4-6. We should be prideful, as Larry said, in the sense that we should be prideful about our leaders and about our salvation, but it only comes from God. And with that caveat, I can agree with what Larry is saying. So, he's saying that pride is, Paul's concerned about the Corinthians, and they should not be boasting about their status, because they really didn't earn it. And so trying to convert that into kind of colloquial English, it might say, on what possible grounds do you boast in this manner? Or even more colloquial, who in the world do you think you are anyway? That's basically what he's saying. Who do you think you are to be so prideful? You know, you don't deserve, you have no reason for that, because you didn't deserve what you got. It was a gift to you. You didn't earn it. It didn't make you superior for that. So did we do anything? Did we do anything to receive the grace of God? Did we deserve it? No. What we did is we accepted it. But we didn't deserve it. We didn't earn it. We weren't a special people to get it, because it's open to everybody. Actually, I jumped ahead of myself. That was 4:7. Why don't you go ahead and read 4:7, Judy, but I actually talked about that.
For who makes you different from anyone else? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as though you did not?
Okay, that would be, who in the world do you think you are anyway? Has anybody ever said something like that to you? I think we probably all have had that said to us, or at least. Okay, Joy, 4, 8, and 9, please.
Already you have all you want. Already you have become rich. You have become kings, and that without us. How I wish that we really had become kings, so that we might be kings with you. For it seems to me that God has put us apostles on display at the end of the procession, like men condemned to die in the arena. We have been made a spectacle to the whole universe, to angels as well as to men.
So he's being very ironic here. He's saying, you puffed yourself up like kings. I wish you were like that, but in reality, we are like men condemned to die, people that are in the procession. The Romans, when they had a triumph, when one of their generals had a major victory, they would have what's called a triumph. And they would have a procession through Rome where the general would be brought in a chariot. He would lead the procession, and behind him would come usually some of the army that was with him, and then would come the loot that they got on wagons and showing off all the stuff that they got. And at the end of the procession was the conquered political leaders and generals of whoever they conquered. And these people would be killed right after that procession. They'd be taken to the arena and killed. So what is he saying about the reality of the apostles? Are they kings? Are they going to be at the front of the procession? No, he's saying they're not. And so you guys are puffing yourself up like you're kings, like you're going to be leading that procession. But in reality, what is the reality? Reality is they're not that. Does that make sense? He's being ironic about telling them they're kings. And then he's saying that the reality is that we are not special. We are the lowest of the low. Do you still feel like that now? Should we feel like that now?
We don't have to feel that way.
Yeah.
Because we have Jesus in our lives.
Yeah, so we have Jesus in our life, so we should be happy in our status, whether or not we're high or low or in the middle. But the point he's trying to make is we shouldn't be boasting about that. You know, it's not something that we should boast about. We are going to end up in a better place, but we should not be boasting about that because we really didn't deserve it. We really didn't earn it. Are we still looking at the society of the Romans? I know we talked about it a little bit, but do we still have that kind of society where people boast about where they are in society? Yeah. So there's nothing changed. You know, as much as we have airplanes and cell phones and things like that, but the basic human experience, I don't think it's changed. We still have people boast. They go out and buy their Teslas, or nowadays, where in the past they would buy Cadillacs to show off their status. And
Trips to outer space.
I'm sorry?
Trips to outer space.
Trips out of state. How many times have I gone to Vegas? Or fancy houses or fancy clothes. And so people still show that off. Does that lead us to having problems? Does that pridefulness lead us to sin?
Yes.
Got Stacy Higa, I think that's a fairly good example of what that kind of I need to show myself off leads us to. If you've been following the paper, obviously he's now in big legal trouble because he was embezzling money to, I would assume, to satisfy his feeling and need to be a certain status in society. And we still have people that do that. And so I don't think that particular human nature has changed over the 2,000 years. To be honest, I don't think the basic human nature has changed a whole lot. So that's why these letters of Paul's are so, even though written so long ago and might focus on some things that are a little bit different, but the basic underlying human condition hasn't changed.
Well, but if you're a humble person and you earn your money, faithfully and truthfully, then I think it's okay if you do not real arrogant.
Yeah, it's really, do you puff yourself up? Do you show yourself as somebody? As many people have told me in the past, it's not the evil, it's not money that's evil, it's the desire of going after it's evil. It's really hard not to have enough money. There's no question about that. But do you need as much money as Mr. Musk or Mr. Gates needs? No.
I don't believe that.
We need a certain amount of money to live comfortably. And but it's the pridefulness if you've done real well where people fall down. It's the suffering of not having enough resources is real. And that can lead to a lot of problems too. And I think initially, even though we sometimes think of our country as being very unchristian, it's the Christian values that were in the initial and still go through a lot of our society of being equal, being supportive of people that are not having enough. You know, we have a society that supplies at least certain basic amounts to people. Maybe you can argue whether or not it's enough or not, but we have allowed education to everybody. We allow a certain amount of support to everybody. And so I think that's rooted on our initial Christian values and continued Christian values, even that it permeate even people that say they're not Christian. And that, you know, that's why we have many of the type of programs that I think are one of the blessings of being a part of this country. But just like then, are we perfect? No. Because we always try to get better. Yes. And how to get better, that's where we get the political argument. Okay. Yeah, 10.
We are fools for Christ, but you are so wise in Christ. We are weak, but you are strong. You are honored, we are dishonored.
And so what kind of phrasing is this? He's being what we would say blank. So what's he doing here?
He's using irony.
He's doing some more irony. You know, even though I was your leader, I'm not as wise as you guys. I'm not as strong as you guys. And of course he is wiser and stronger. And so he's being ironic there. So when we read the Bible, we got to realize that, you know, we try to take the Bible as without fault or without any wrongness, but we got to realize how it's written and what it's written about, and not take a phrase like this and make it unreasonable, because he's being ironic. He's actually saying the opposite. You know, he's trying to drive home a point to them. Anybody else that we read or hear about do that? Usually his words are in red in some Bibles. So who else does that? Who else has done that? Jesus. And so we need to be careful when we read some of those passages to make sure that we read them in the context of what he was trying to do. And not take it in a literal sense of this is what he meant, but try to get it in the context, because that's the truth. And so sometimes we need to be careful about that. Okay, so when 11 to 13, please.
To this very hour, we go hungry and thirsty. We are in want. We are brutally treated. We are homeless. We work hard with our own hands. When we are cursed, we bless. When we are persecuted, we endure it. When we are slandered, we answer kindly. Up to this moment, we have become the scum of the earth, the refuse of the world.
So what is he doing here? What is he saying about his condition, all the other missionaries? What is their condition? Did Paul get at the head of the procession in the cities that he went to go visit, or how was he treated?
They're not being treated in the best ways, but yet they still do what they need to do.
Yeah, so that's correct. So this is the reality of how the apostles were being treated. Remember, he had to work with his hands to support himself. He was beaten, stoned, run out of a number of different towns, often was hungry, was shipwrecked several times. And so that's the reality of the apostle. That's the reality of the missionary. And what were they doing? What were the Corinthians doing? Just the opposite. So they're saying that they're superior to everybody else, and they should be treated as superior. Does that mean that we need to starve, beat, and try to drown our pastors and things like that? No. We do try to support our missionaries, but they live a hard life. I think all of you have probably heard about what's happened in Haiti. Best I can tell from the news, that hasn't been resolved. There was, I believe, 17 missionaries. I could not quite figure out what church they came from, but that have been kidnapped by a very brutal and dangerous criminal gang, and with threats on their life that they didn't pay significant ransom for them. And I haven't heard anything recently that's been resolved. Larry, or anybody that might follow it, know anything differently?
I haven't heard anything else.
And we do hear about missionaries being killed. Well, none of the missionaries make a lot of money, and they do it for the love of God. We hope that they don't starve. That's why we have our different offerings that we have several times during the year. We try to keep them from doing that, but I don't think any of them make a lot of money. None of them are going out and buying Cadillacs or Teslas. So the reality of Paul's experience was that he was not a king. He was not somebody that should be prideful in his condition. He should be, as Larry said, prideful in the sense of his salvation, that he actually had that, but not that he earned it, but it was a gift from God. Any questions about this section? So what is the one thing that he's upset with the Corinthians in this section about? What is the one sin that he is concerned that they're doing?
Prideful.
Pride, yeah. So he's saying that they have unreasonable pride. They shouldn't be prideful of their condition because they didn't earn it. And the reality is that they're not kings, and if they think they're better than apostles, the reality of the apostles' life is a really hard one. As an aside, there are some commentators that think that while Paul had started us off saying that there's cliques or groups that were behind Paul, behind Apollos, behind Peter, that he might be being nice to them, that there actually were leaders in the church that had people getting behind them. And rather than calling them out by name, he substituted his name and Apollos' name. Whether or not this is true or not, I don't know, but some of the commentators spend a lot of time talking about that. Do we do that sometimes? Do we use a euphemism when we don't want to be too hard on something or somebody? I think we still do that. We'll go on to the next section, which is actually 4:14 to 4:21, and is Paul's warning and appeal for as their spiritual father. if your father or mother, how do you treat your children if you think they are misbehaving?
Discipline them.
You discipline them. And usually you also point out to them that this is the behavior I think you ought to be doing. And hopefully if your behavior is that, you say you should be behaving like I am. And so this is what he's going to be doing. That he's going to be kind of finishing up this section. That he has concern about them. So if you're disciplining your child, are you really mad at them? Are you really hateful with them? What are you really are?
You love them.
You're loving them. So he's, you know, he's expressing his concern, not that he is ostracizing them or going to get rid of them. He's concerned about them and because he loves them. So as a parent, you love your children even if you're disciplining, especially young children. How do they feel about that? Yeah, they don't always think that that's a very loving thing. All of us as grandchildren, I've been really impressed, now that I am one, to hear what we were telling our son out of his mouth. His child. Do the rest of you hear that? I find it quite amusing. Okay, Debbie 4:14.
I am not writing this to shame you, but to warn you, as my dear children.
Yeah, so he's saying, you know, I'm not really trying to put you up and shame you a whole lot, but I'm treating you as a child because I'm concerned about you. And I'm going to ask, have all of you said something like that to your children when you're disciplining them? Otherwise, as we often say, this is for your own benefit. But not that I'm, you know, angry. I had boys, I never had girls, and so sometimes they make me really angry. But you try to discipline them in a loving fashion. And why would you want to discipline somebody?
They go the right path.
You want them to correct their behavior. You want it before it becomes a real problem. Okay, let's go back to Larry 15, please.
Even though you have 10,000 guardians in Christ, you do not have many fathers, for in Christ Jesus I became your father through the gospel.
And so he's continuing the metaphor of them being his children. And we find that as a metaphor all through the Bible, that Jesus used it, Paul uses it a lot, that, you know, the parent-child metaphor that, you know, that goes on. In what way is Paul their father? And what kind of father is he?
Spiritual father.
Exactly right. So he's their spiritual father. And so he's their father in the sense that he brought them to Christ, and he's their spiritual father. It says 10,000 guardians. There's two things to say about that. 10,000 to the Greeks was the biggest or highest number imaginable. So he's saying no matter how many guardians you have, you only have one father. You can have an infinite amount of guardians, but you only have one father. The word translated in the NIV as guardians is actually a word that what meant a trustworthy slave of an upper class family that was in charge of the responsibility of supervising their children in their education, life, and morals. And so they were a slave that had the responsibility of taking care of the owner's children in their education, their upbringing, and their morals. All of us as grandparents have somewhat similar responsibility. What do we call ourselves now that in that situation? What's the word that we use, our words? When your kids call you and ask you to watch the children, what do they ask you to do?
Babysit.
Babysit. So this word is babysitter. So he's saying, even though you have 10,000 babysitters, you only have one father. And so if you can have an infinite amount of babysitters. So what is he saying about the leaders in Corinth that have been prideful about their position? What is he saying they are in reality?
That's babysitters.
Babysitters. That's not a bad. We all end up doing. In fact, I ended up doing it this morning before church. So my son and daughter-in-law could. Well, actually, my wife did most of it, but well, they could go off and actually serve and do some other things. And so it's not a bad situation, but it's not something you should be. Hey, I'm a babysitter. I think it's a wonderful thing to do, but it's not a high status in society. Do we pay our babysitters, our child's care people very much? No. And that's why we're having a lot of trouble right now, because people don't sign up for doing that because they can find higher reimbursement or payment someplace else. So it's not something that society then or now looks at as a high status position. In a family it is, because families can't get by without somebody doing something. And so is there any real comparison between their spiritual father and their current guardians? Are they on the same level as Paul? No. And so he's saying that you shouldn't be looking at these people as highly regarded as you presently are. Okay, Judy 16 through 17, please.
Therefore, I urge you,
That's right.
Therefore, I urge you to imitate me. For this reason, I am sending to you Timothy, my son whom I love, who is faithful in the Lord, who will remind you of my way of life in Christ Jesus, which agrees with what I teach everywhere in every church.
So what does he want them to do?
Imitate him.
Yeah. And what kind of life did Paul have?
Hard.
Tough one.
Yeah, it was hard, but what was his focus of his life?
Jesus.
Jesus. He wants them to focus on their identity as Christians and live out a Christian life by imitating the way that he lived. Would they know how he lived? He'd spent a year and a half living with them. Would they know firsthand how he lived his life? They should. Yeah. They should know how he lived his life. And from all we can tell, he lived a very humble life. And so what did he want them to be, in imitating him, what did he want them to become? What kind of person in Christ did he want them to become? I'm sorry?
Faithful believer.
And so what do we call a faithful believer? It starts with a D. It's in our mission statement.
Disciple.
Disciples. So he wanted them to become disciples of Christ. This wanting him to imitate him and become disciples of Christ, is that unique charge to the Corinthian church, or would it be a charge to others? To everybody. And so this is something that all of us still should try to do, is imitate his life, live a Christian life in a meaningful way, and be a disciple for Christ. And we still say that. That's part of who we are. Okay. Joy, 18 to 21, please.
Is that
18 to 21.
18 to 21. Some of you have become arrogant as if I were not coming to you. But I will come to you very soon if the Lord is willing. And then I will find out not only how to make these arrogant people, how these arrogant people are talking, but what power they have. For the kingdom of God is not a matter of talk, but of power. What do you prefer? Shall I come to you with a whip or a love and with a gentle spirit?
So he's sending Timothy. Remember, this letter was written from another city of Ephesus. Timothy was, as we have read in Acts and otherwise, was a companion of Paul's, but somebody that Paul really thought highly of, because he was willing to send Timothy in his place to try to have the Corinthians work things out. And he's saying that he's hoping to come to visit them. But what is his caveat? What is it? It's kind of what we still do now, if the Lord is willing. It's not clear if he ever made it back to Corinth from the Acts, but he wanted to come. Where do we get our power from? He's saying that it's not just talking, but power, and we have some kind of power. What kind of power do we have? And where does it come from?
From the Holy Spirit.
I'm sorry?
From the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, so it's spiritual power from this. And so not just talking, our power is from the Spirit. And again, as a parent, do we ever have something like he's saying here, do you want me to love you and be nice? I don't know if that's the quiet way. Or do you want to have a spanking to fix your bad behavior? Are you going to be, and then we might say, are you going to behave, or do I need to spank you? I'm not going to ask if anybody's ever said something like that. Nowadays that would get us into trouble. But I'm sure we've all, if we haven't thought of it or said it, we have really been tempted to say something like that. Are you going to behave? Or do I have to do something more? Are you going to have a timeout, I guess, nowadays? Or will you behave?
I wonder how the Corinthians took that.
How was your children and grandchildren taking that? What kind of response would you get? Again, I only had boys, and that usually did not go over real well. I'm sorry. The noise. talking to adults is right, but he's talking to them in the metaphor of parent to a child. And so you would hope that they would say, I don't want you to come in the first fashion with a whip, and I want you to come and be nice to me. I'll try to fix my problem. You would hope that. So the first 4 chapters of Paul's letters basically deal with the divisions that were developing in the Corinthian church and them being prideful about their human leaders and prideful in themselves. And he's basically telling them you should not be prideful of them. If you're going to be prideful in anything, it's your salvation through Jesus Christ. You need to imitate me as a disciple of Christ. And not be overly prideful of your situation because you didn't deserve it. And so we're going to move on now to the next major section, and he deals with a number of issues that seem to be brought to him in a letter or somebody bringing questions to him. So he answers over the next section, which is 5:1 to 7:40, where he deals with a number of different concerns that the Corinthian church had directly asked him how to deal with. It's going to be dealing with sexual immorality, the civil courts, and the issue of marriage and singleness. And so these are issues that the church had asked him for guidance. And he tries to deal with them directly. The first one is actually sexual immorality. In a specific case of a incestuous man. And this is 5:1 through 13. Let's see, who read last? I'm sorry. I think it's Joey's turn. 5:1?
Oh, no, was it my turn?
Oh, your turn.
Okay.
Charmaine, 5:1?
Okay, 5:1. Expel the immoral brother. It is actually recorded that there is sexually immorality among you, and of a kind that does not occur even among pagans. A man has his father's wife.
And so, what will we call this now?
Incest.
Incest. Do we still think that's not a good thing? Yeah, we still don't think it's a good thing. And so even, as he said, even the pagans were upset about this. And the way he's saying it, this is a case that was widely known of general knowledge. It's not something, well, did you know that so-and-so was doing this? And they would say, no, this is something that, the way he's phrasing it in the Greek is something that was widely known and of general knowledge. It's not a surprise to the members of the congregation that this is actually they knew about. Be honest about it, if somebody's doing something and I don't know about it, then it's hard for me to deal with it. But in this case, the way he's phrasing it in Greek is they knew about it, and it was widely known. Also, the way he's phrasing it, it's unlikely that the woman was his mother, was probably his stepmother, and that the stepmother was a member of the church. And so when we get into this is things that we need to remember. One, it was widely known that this was going on. the woman involved was his stepmother, which was still incest, but she was not a member of the church. And so, in essence, because Paul ended up talking pretty much only about the man. And the reason for that is he's dealing with this person, the man, who is a member of the church, as a member of the church, not as a general illegal thing being done in the general society. And so he had no spiritual authority over the woman's situation because she wasn't a member of the church. Does that make sense? If we think about things, as a church, we really have, I might say, spiritual authority over ourselves. But if somebody else is not a member of the church, do we really have any spiritual authority over them? No, we don't. So, some people have kind of been upset about the fact that Paul's only talking about the man, but that's the reason why. The Greeks, and remember this was while Rome was still a Greek, actually had one of their major myths dealing with a situation like this, where unknowingly a son came back and ended up marrying his stepmother. And all kinds of grief came from that. And so, and this was hundreds of years before this time. So this particular situation was felt to be something that even the Greek thought was very sinful and would be severely punished. Even in this case, as Phidias, I probably pronounced that incorrectly, he married his stepmother, not knowing that it was his stepmother, and they all ended up being cursed and having, terrible problems. So, as Paul says here, even the pagans would be upset about this situation, and so they're upset. How should the Christians deal with this? Should they be upset too? Of course, they should be upset.
Dad.
Yeah.
If there's known sexual immorality in the church and the pastor is made aware of it, is it his responsibility to address it?
How do the rest of you feel about that? We're probably going to run out of time, so I'm probably going to stop now. Because actually this is what this deals with the rest of the verses that we're going to be talking about. His answer, and I'll jump ahead to what we'll deal with next week. His answer is it's the church's responsibility to deal with that. It's the church's responsibility and he's talking about this situation, to excommunicate in a loving fashion that member. Now, he's talking about incest. We can talk about, when your question is more general, what are we talking about? But basically, he's going to say that it's the church responsibility to excommunicate this person for now, but it's not in the sense of forever excommunicating him. It's trying to get him to change his behavior in a loving fashion, but you need to have that person out of the body of the Christ. He uses, and we'll deal with it next week, the metaphor of yeast. And so if you take yeast and put it in your bread, what happens to the dough? I'm sorry. The yeast spreads all through that, and the Passover time of the Jews they were supposed to get all the old yeast out of the house. And so the first bread would be unleavened, unyeasted bread, because the old yeast would contaminate anything. So he's basically saying that sexual immorality in that member of the church is contaminating all of the church. And so the answer is not the pastor should have the person not come, but all of us should do that. Now we might direct the pastor to have initial conversation with whoever that is. But it's really the whole body of Christ that has to deal with it, and not just dump something like that totally on the pastor. It's our responsibility. If that person changes his behavior, how should we treat them?
Welcome him into the fold.
That's right, exactly. Welcome him back into the fold. And so this was not an excommunication in the sense of forever. We were not going to kill the person. We're not going to do anything else, but we should keep them away from the rest of the body of the Christ so that the rest of the body of Christ doesn't get contaminated. And if he changes his behavior, he'd be welcomed back in. And pretty much that's what Christ has said, if we repent our sins, we are forgiven. But, and I'm again jumping ahead, what does that mean about the general society? Because remember, he specifically did not deal with the woman. He's only dealing with the member of the congregation. And so we might not be happy with how people are dealing with their lives in the general population, but in reality, since they're not believers and not members of the society, not members of our church, we need to be careful how we deal with them, because we don't have any spiritual authority over them. Did that answer your question? Yeah, so in essence, you know something's going on and you think it's something that needs to be dealt with. It's probably prudent to tell the pastor to have the initial conversation with, say, hey Dan, you're screwing up. And so if I fix whatever I'm doing, then we can leave it at that. But if it becomes widespread general knowledge and nothing's being done, then it's really all, for all of us to probably say we shouldn't have you coming until you change your ways. Okay. I think that's used up my time. Again, I'm going to remind you that we are going to have a question and answer about the property immediately after church service. And so if you have questions about what's going on, how I'm going to deal with it is I'm going to give a little synopsis of the Lama Street, the offer, and also what the building and planning has been seeing with the Kapulani seat. Pastor Shane is going to deal with one particular spiritual issue about the property. And then I'm going to open it up for question and answers. Okay. Yes?
I'm just curious, has there been anyone who has approached the church about their concerns about the way we're going to be voting?
No, not that I know of.
Nobody has had that concern yet.
The bylaws state that a motion like this can only be voted on by the members present. And it takes a 50% majority to pass the motion. That's what our bylaws say. Nobody's come to me, and to be honest about it, they might have come to some other people, but we had a brief meeting, well, it wasn't all that brief, about 2 hours on Friday. And as far as I know, there's the one family has sent us a number of concerns about the property, and we've talked about them. But nothing about how it's going to be voted. And I think probably what might be asked is, can you have proxies? And the answer is no. You have to be present to vote. There's no requirement of a quorum. There is a requirement that we've actually published, at least told people we're going to have a meeting. Okay, did that answer your question then? Was that pretty much what the question was? Somebody must have said something to you, so is that what they were asking?
No, but I just wondered that.
Okay, nobody's brought up how we're going to vote. The issues have been, some other issues. Basically, it's an older building, and it was a pagan church to begin with. That's specifically what I'm going to have Pastor Shane talk about.
I brought it up because I was talking to another church member who isn't attending right now for one reason or another, and that person had some questions. They misunderstood, I think, a few things, and I had to explain to them the simplest information that I could give them, but I was surprised that they knew so little. So I wondered if these same people would be wondering if they have a chance to vote on this. But that's why I was glad this letter came out from Shane, letting the membership know that we were having this info meeting today.
Yeah, we're trying not to hide anything.
Yeah, no, it's not that, but
And
if they really
if that
are
person,
interested, they should come and ask those questions.
that person has specific questions that maybe they have, and if not going to be at the meeting today or next week Sunday, probably what you should tell them is email or call Pastor Shane what those questions are. Then he'll give it out to the rest of the committee and try to have those questions answered. Whatever the questions are. Okay. Anything else? If not, I'm going to close this with prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for the time that we have to come and study your word. It is so relevant that what Paul has been writing to the Corinthians still impacts our daily life today, because our human experience hasn't changed. Lord, in addition, we want to pray about the decision that we have about the 400 Lama Street property and the future of your church. Lead us, lead the church, lead all the members in the way that you want us to go. In your Son's name I pray. Amen. Again, please hang around. You might hear me talk more than you want, but I'm going to try to explain in detail what the situation is in the two different properties. Okay.